Greetings to all peoples and kingdoms of Arda, and welcome to Shield Maidens of Arda. The beautiful love story of Beren and Lúthien is well known, but there was another aspect in Tolkien's creation of this story that is often untold, the Lay of Leithian. This beautiful poem that tells the tale of the elf maiden and her mortal lover was sadly unfinished by Tolkien, but there are still 13 complete cantos and 4,200 lines for us to enjoy and explore, and that is precisely what we will do today. So sit back and let this shield maiden be your guide into the wonderful world of Middle-earth. JRR Tolkien began work on a Lay of Leithian in 1925 and worked on it on and off until abandoning the work in 1931. He took it up again following the completion of The Lord of the Rings, but it was never finished, leaving us with 13 of the 17 planned cantos completed. The lay is written in lines of iambic tetrameter and uses rhyming couplets. The word lay itself means a narrative in verse, telling a story, as this one does of the deeds of Beren and Lúthien. The full title of the lay reads as follows: The Jest of Beren, son of Beleriand, and Lúthien the Fae called Tenufio the Nightingale, or the Lay of Leithian, released from bondage. The word Leithian is very interesting. Tolkien never fully explained it, but the most simple meaning of it has been understood to be release from bondage. What this exact bondage is, the reader is left to draw their own conclusions of, from the many choices within the lay. The bondage with the Cimmerose and Morgoth crown, the bondage of Lúthien by her father on a beech tree, the bondage of Beren by Sauron in the dungeons of Tor and Galroth. Ultimately, it seems to hold the overarching theme of the endless fight against evil and the hope for freedom and victory. There are also other possible connections for the word Leithian, one of the most intriguing being an early form for the Elven word for England. Tolkien went through many changes in his working of the poem, some of them being the names of the principal characters. Beren was called Maglord first, Thingol Cullagorm, Lúthien Meliart. Eventually, he settled on the names that we all know and love so dearly, and the other titles were reused for further players in this story or other ones. Tolkien sent his work to his good friend C.S. Lewis in 1931, after abandoning it. Lewis wrote back expressing his pleasure over the lay, saying, "I can quite honestly say that it is ages since I have had an evening of such delight." Despite his friend's warm encouragement, however, Tolkien never brought himself to complete the poem, and the unfinished version was eventually published in 1985 in the Lays of Beleriand by Christopher Tolkien. There we have the wonderful lines to enjoy and read, immersing ourselves in the beautiful story of heroes and heroines, dangerous quest, and brave deeds. The first canto tells of Thingol's Hall and of his beloved daughter, Lúthien. We have some beautiful imagery and descriptions here. Robe as blue as summer skies, laughter lighter than the spring. The lines, He wielded from his ivory throne, in many-pillared halls of stone, their beryl pearl and opal pale, and metal wrought like fish's mail. Buckler and corslet, axe and sword, and gleaming spears were laid in hoard. Were changed slightly and were used in Gimli's Song of Moria. A king he was on carven throne, in many-pillared halls of stone, their beryl pearl and opal pale, and metal wrought like fish's mail. Buckler and corslet, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Canto 2 tells of the Dark Lord Morgoth, of the man Beleriand and his brave company of men, of Gollum the Unhappy and how he was deceived by the Dark Lord, of Beren's valiant deeds, and at last of Beren's flight from the forces of Morgoth. In the lay, Gollum's betrayal of Beleriand and his men is much worse, as the man actually seeks out the servants of Morgoth in an attempt to bargain for a chance to see his wife again, whereas in the prose version, he is captured, brought before Sauron, not Morgoth, and made an offer. This canto chronicles the story of Thingol and Melion and how they fall in love. It speaks of Darion, the minstrel, and how he is the greatest of the musicians of Arda. We then hear some beautiful descriptions of Luthien dancing in the glade, and we are swept into the story of Beren's moment of fate as he beholds the elven maiden. Now it befell on summer night, upon a lawn where lingering light yet lay and faded faint and grey, that Luthien danced while he did play. The chestnuts on the turf had shed the flowering candles white and red. There darkling stood a silent elm, and pale beneath this shadowed helm. There glimmered faint the embers thick of hemlocks like a mist and quick. The moth on pallid wings of white, with tiny eyes of fiery light, were fluttering softly, and the boars crept out to listen from their hoars. The little owls were hushed and still. The moon was yet behind the hill. Her arms like ivory were gleaming. Her long hair like a cloud was streaming. Her feet a twinkle wandered roaming in misty mazes in the gloaming. And glowworms shimmered round her feet, and moth and moving garland fleet. Above her head went wavering wan, and this the moon now looked upon, uprisen slow and round and white, above the branches of the night. Then clearly thrilled her voice and rain, with sudden ecstasy she sang, a song of nightingales she learned, and with her elvish magic turned, to such bewildering delight, the moon hung moveless in the night. And this it was that Beren heard, and this he saw without a word, enchanted dumb, yet filled with fire, of such a wonder and desire, that all his mortal mind was dim. Her magic bound and fettered him, and faint he leaned against a tree, for wandered wayworn gaunt was he, his body sick and heart gone cold, grey in his hair his youth turned old. For those that tread that lonely way, a price of woe and anguish pay. And now his heart was healed and slain, with a new life and with new pain. In Canto 4, we see Beren and Lúthien's growing love for each other. We are also told of Darion's anger, and how the stranger in Thingol's realm was made known to him. Beren is then brought before the Elven King, and although Thingol has sworn not to kill the man, he tries to twist his words to allow Beren to fall to death by another way. But Beren refutes this, and in a beautiful, brave voice he declares, "Twist not thy oath, O Elvish King, like faithless Morgoth, by this ring, the token of a lasting bond, that Felagund of Nagathorn once swore in love to Barahir, who sheltered him with shield and spear, and saved him from pursuing foe on northern battlefields long ago. Dost thou kennest give unearned to me, but names I will not take from thee, of baseborn spy or Morgoth thrall. Are these the ways of Thingol's hall?" Thingol then lays out the price of his daughter, a Cimmeril from Morgoth's crown. Beren accepts it and takes his leave. The word gnome is still in use for the Northern Elves by this time in Tolkien's work, and we see also the word Tavros, an early term for the Valar Orome. There is also another incident of Tolkien reusing verse. Those who have read Stridel's Song of Beren and Lúthien will recognize line 797. There trembled the starlight of the skies, as reused by Tolkien, the trembling starlight of the skies. In this canto, Lúthien speaks to Melion, and learning of Beren's imprisonment, she decides to go and free her lover. She tries to enlist the help of Darion, but he instead betrays her to her father, and Thingol encloses her in a house in a beech tree. One night, she receives a dream or vision of Beren calling to her, and she determines to escape. Here follows a very interesting recounting of her means of flight. She sends to be brought to her water drawn in a dark pool at midnight, and a bowl of silver white, with no word spoken. Then she asked for wine and a jar of gold brought to her at high noon, while the barrel sings merrily. Then she asked for her mother to send her a spinning wheel, and for Delion to make her a loom. With all of these, she weaves a magic cloak that has the power of putting to sleep, and using this, she escapes her treehouse prison and, light as a squirrel and away she danced, and who could say what path she took, whose elven feet no empress made a dancing fleet. Canto 6 begins with a long narrative of Fëanor and his sons, of their infamous oath, and of some of the early battles against Morgoth. We are also told of the gifting of the Ring of Borahir to the man of the same name, and how his son uses it now to gain entrance into the lands of Nargothrond. In this stage of Tolkien's writings, Finrod is known as Felagund, and the formal name is used for his father. Beren makes a claim upon Felagund's aid, and although the elf is troubled over possible consequences, he will not break the oath he made to Borahir. But the two sons of Fëanor, Cullagorm and Cuafen, who are staying in Nargothrond, stir up the people against their king, and Felagund is left with only 10 elves who will brave this quest with him. He bequeaths the crown in his absence to Ordreth, who in this version is said to be his brother. Felagund and his companions come upon an orc party, which they slay, and the elven king uses his power to disguise the elves and Beren in the raiment of the orcs. Their whereabouts are noted by the Servant of Morgoth, who is known in the Lay not as Sauron but as Thu, and they are brought before him. Hence commences the great singing riddle contest. Tolkien uses a changed meter in certain parts of the Lay here, giving us a feeling of riddles and rhyming. Thu's imagery here is powerful. The wind wails, the wolf howls, the ravens flee, the ice mutters in the mouth of the sea, the captive sad and Angband mourn, thunder rumbles, the files burn. And it eventually strips Felagund and his companions of their disguises, and they are thrown into a dungeon. But Thu does not know all their secrets, and he daily sends in a werewolf to devour one of them in the hope that it will break the rust and convince them to speak. On an interesting side note, there was a struck-out line by Tolkien in which he considers having Thu himself shapeshift into these werewolves. In Canto 8, we come back to Lúthien as she makes her way to where her lover is being held captive. She is found and brought before the sons of Fëanor by Cullagorm's wolfhound, Huon, and there the brothels make as if they would help her. Instead, they bring her back to Nargothrond, take away her magic cloak, and lock her up. In her prison, Lúthien makes friends with the wolfhound Huon. The latter rescues her one night in autumn, using his powers of speech for the first time, and they together continue on the journey to the dark fortress where Beren lies. Tolkien went through many changes at this point in the story, and several of them are fascinating. In one version, Cullagorm relents, gives her back her cloak, and sets her free. In others, Huon is master of his own lands, and has no connection to the sons of Fëanor. It is also interesting how in the Lay, it is Cuafen instead of Cullagorm who is in love with Lúthien, and is seen to be the instigator of many of the brothels' deeds. In the 9th canto, we see Felagund and Beren alone in the dungeons of Thu. Their names are discovered, and a werewolf is sent to kill Beren. Felagund breaks free of his chain and fights and slays the beast, himself dying in the process. Beren hears a voice without. It is Lúthien come to rescue him. Thu sees that she has come, too, and sends out his werewolves to slay her. But Huon fights and kills every wolf sent out against them. Finally, Thu himself comes out in the guise of a wolf, and they struggle along. Huon at last has mastery, and Lúthien agrees to let the dark being free if he will surrender to her the wards to open and destroy the tower. He does so and flees in the form of a giant bat. Luthien pours down the dark fortress, and the prisoners within come out gladly. She finds Beren mourning beside the body of Felagund, and sits beside him to comfort him. Canto 10 begins with Beren and Luthien burying Felagund. They then travel on towards Doriath, but they are in disagreement about which path to take once they reach its borders. Beren will not enter the elven lands because of his oath, and Luthien refuses to leave him. As they argue this, Felagund and Lúthien, who have been banished from Nargothrond by his fickle people and lord, come upon them. Lúthien tries to grab Luthien, but Beren fights with him, and is on the verge of ending his life when Luthien begs him to desist. Beren takes Lúthien's horse and knife, which in later tales will become known as Angrist, but is unnamed in the Lay. As the brothers leave, they attempt to shoot at the two lovers. Huron catches one dart, but Beren is wounded by the other. Lúthien, the faithful wolfhound, who has now abandoned Felagund as master, heals Beren, and he awakes the following morning. Still in disagreement as to their course, they travel on and reach the borders of Doriath. As Luthien sleeps, Beren silently takes his leave, bidding Huron to watch over her. In Canto 11, we have the beautiful song of farewell that Beren sings. Luthien and Huron come upon him as he finishes it. Unlike the Silmarillion, the elven maiden wolfhound are not yet in disguise, and therefore do not give Beren the horrible fright they do in the later versions of the tale, when he sees a vampire and werewolf coming upon him. Huron speaks for the second time, giving them advice, and they then don the skins of vampire and werewolf. Then comes a wonderful moment of poetry, where we feel the desperate course of Beren and Luthien as they rush onward towards the dark lands and the Lord who rules there. Ashes and dust and thirsty dune, withered and dry beneath the moon, under the cold and shifting air, sifting and sighing, bleak and bare, of blistered stones and gasping sand, of splintered bones was built that land, over which now slinks with powdered fell, and hanging tongues a shape of hell. Many parching leagues lay still before, when sickly day crept back once more. Many choking miles yet stretched ahead, when shivering night once more was spread, with doubtful shadow and ghostly sound, that hissed and passed over dune and mound. A second morning, in cloud and weak, struggled when stumbling, blind and weak, a wolfish shape came staggering forth, and reached the foothills of the north. Upon his back there folded lay a crumpled thing that blinked at day. In Canto 12, we are again taken back to a moment of history, Fingolfin's battle with Morgoth. Though the Dark Lord eventually defeated the Elven King, Morgoth did not escape unscathed from that battle, and a deep, lingering fear lay on him. He hears of Huron and the doom of the Wolfhound, and breeds for himself a monstrous, evil werewolf, fed on the flesh of men and elves, Carcharoth. This tortured being of evil stands always at the entrance to Morgoth's realm, guarding its gates, sleepless and devouring. We are again brought to the present as Beren and Luthien approach the gate in their disguises. Carcharoth suspects them. He questions Beren and can sense Luthien under the bat disguise. Luthien, seeing that they are found out, slips from her bat skin and, using her magic cloak, sends Carcharoth into a deep sleep. Canto 13 opens with the mortal man and elfish maiden making their way down into the dark, horrible depth of Morgoth's realm. They enter the throne room of the Dark Lord, and Morgoth calls for Luthien to reveal herself, sensing, as Carcharoth had, that there was something hidden up beneath. Luthien says that her name is Thuringwithil. In the later versions, this name is used for the bat-like messenger of Sauron, whose skin is used for Lúthien's disguise, but as this is the first time we are hearing of it in the Lay, it could be that in here, Lúthien devised this name, She of Hidden Shadow, as a riddling description of herself. Morgoth and Lúthien then converse. As the Dark Lord is preparing to take Lúthien for his own devices, she quickly offers to dance for him. In the ensuing moments, she manages to send all to a deep sleep, including Beren. As soon as Morgoth succumbs, she wakes Beren and they try together to wrest the Silmaril from the Dark Lord's crown. Beren remembers the knife that he took from Cuathn, and with it, he succeeds in freeing one jewel. But as he tries to get another free, the blade snaps and a piece of it strikes Morgoth's cheek. The hall slowly begins to awaken to the deeply foreboding last verses of the Canto. There came a breath, a gasping sound, moved through the halls as orc and beast, torn in their dreams of hideous feast. In sleep uneasy, Belrog stirred, and far above was faintly heard an echo that in tunnels roared, a wolfish howling long in code. The last unfinished canto tells of Beren and Lúthien's desperate flight from Morgoth Hall and their coming upon the waking Cockoroth. In the Lay, Beren tries to grab at the beast's throat and strike at Cockoroth's eyes with the Silmaril. In later versions, he simply tries to use the Silmaril to daunt the werewolf. The evil beast is only halted a moment, and then he lunges forward and snaps off Beren's hand, and we get the last horrifying lines of the Lay. As gleam of swords and fire there flashed, the fangs of Cockoroth and crashed, together like a trap that tore, the hand about the wrist and shore, through brittle bone and sinew nush, devouring the frail mortal flesh, and in that cruel mouth unclean, engulfed the jewel's holy sheen. Thus ends the Lay of Leithian, but a few isolated sheets of paper contain two final sets of verses. The first tells of Beren after his hand is torn from him by Cockoroth. Against the wall then Beren reeled, but still with his love he sought to shield fair Lúthien, who cried aloud to see his pain, and down she bowed, in anguish sinking to the ground. The last set of verses is a chilling passage of Lúthien's journey through the halls of Mandos. It ends with these verses. No moon is there, no voice, no sound, of beating heart, a sigh profound. Once in each age, as each age dies, alone is heard, far, far it lies, the land of waiting where the dead sit, and their thoughts shadow by no moon lit. The rest of the Lay is written out in brief summary, outline how Beren and Lúthien returned to Thingol, how Beren fought the wolf Cockoroth, and how he and Lúthien were at last reunited forever beyond the circles of the world. Tolkien went back to it in later years and rewrote some of the cantos, perhaps intending to finally complete it, but his work seemed to be taken up with finishing the Silmarillion, and it remains the way we read it in the Lays of Beleriand today. A beautiful, thrilling poem of love, triumph, courage, and freedom, to inspire us and drive us onward, to fight for all that is good and true and beautiful, even as Beren and Lúthien did in the midst of all their pain and sorrow. As our exploration of this beautiful story comes to a close, I will leave you now with Beren's words, speaking on his love for Lúthien and the power and willingness to sacrifice all for that love. Thy love me drew from bondage drear, but never to that outer fear, that darkest mansion of our dread, should thy most blissful light be led. Thank you for joining with me today in the Word of Order. Please like this video, subscribe to Shield Maidens, and join us again so we can explore more of Middle-earth together. Namaste.